imagine this for a moment. You've got this ancient community of monks, right? All dedicated to spiritual growth, meditation, quiet contemplation.
A serene picture.
Exactly. But then the unthinkable happens. This peaceful place is suddenly hit by a wave of self-harm and, even more shocking, monks asking other monks to end their lives.
Yeah, it sounds almost like a dark legend, doesn't it?
It really does, but it's not fiction. This is the chilling historical backdrop to one of the most foundational, most serious rules in ancient Buddhist monastic law.
It's a truly compelling, if disturbing, origin story. Today we're taking a deep dive into the Pārājika III. It's an ancient Buddhist rule from the Vinaya texts.
And these aren't just some dusty old legal codes, are they?
Not at all. They're extraordinary insights into human behavior. I mean, the ethical dilemmas they faced back then, and the frankly profound wisdom developed to tackle them.
Okay. And based on the amazing source material you've brought us, our mission today is to unpack this specific rule. It governs what they saw as the absolute gravest offense in that tradition, intentionally taking a human life.
We'll dig into the historical context, what actually led to the rule being created in the first place.
And the nuances of intention, which seem incredibly detailed.
Oh, absolutely. And how surprisingly relevant or modern these ancient regulations can feel.
Right. Let's find out what they really reveal about, well, the human condition.
Okay.
So let's set the scene. We start in Vesali, a major ancient city, at a place called the Mahavana Kuggarasalya. This is where the Buddha himself was staying. And he taught the monks something called a Subhakatha. What exactly is that?
It's a discourse, a teaching focused on the impermanence and the unpleasantness of the body, the non-attractive aspects.
Okay. And after this teaching, he announced he was going on a retreat.
That's right. A half-month retreat for deep meditation, a paisalitu. He said only one monk, the alms-gatherer, or Pichapataniharika, should approach him during this time.
So he was seeking solitude for his own practice.
Precisely. But that teaching, the Asubhakathatha, is really crucial here. The practice itself, Asubhavavana Yoga, meditating on the body's unpleasantness. It's meant to cultivate detachment.
Right, detachment from the physical form, reduce craving, that sort of thing.
Exactly, a tool for liberation. But in this specific instance, the monks, well, they took it to an extreme.
An extreme which led to unforeseen consequences.
Devastating consequences. While the Buddha was away, these monks practiced diligently, very diligently.
But it got unsettling.
Deeply unsettling. Their meditation became so intense, so overpowering, that they grew utterly disgusted with their own bodies. A profound aversion took hold.
And this led to what?
It led to horror, frankly. Some monks committed suicide. The text says, Atanapi atana jivita vorapenti. They took their own lives. And others, incredibly, asked their fellow monks to kill them. Anyamanyampi jivita vorapenti.
Asked fellow monks to kill them. That's hard to fathom. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How even supposedly noble intentions, if they're misdirected or unbalanced, can just spiral.
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder of the mind's power, both for good and potentially for destruction, if it's not guided properly.
So this is where we meet a specific character.
Yes, a man named Migalankica. He's described as a Samadakutaka, which is sometimes translated as a lay follower or perhaps someone on the fringes of the community.
And these desperate monks approached him.
They did. They offered him their most essential possessions, their robes and alms bowls, the patakavada, as payment.
Payment. To be killed.
Yes. And Migalankica accepted. He then proceeded to kill quite a number of monks. The text gives figures, up to 60 in a single day.
60 monks in a day.
It's a shocking number. But the psychological twist comes next. After doing this, Migalankica felt remorse. He's washing his sword, which is stained with blood, in the Vagamuda River, and he's wondering, have I accumulated terrible karma?
So he had some conscience about it initially.
Initially, yes. But then a figure appears, a Marakayika Devata. This is a deity associated with Mara, the tempter figure in Buddhism, linked with unwholesome influences, illusion, death itself.
Okay, so not a good sign.
Definitely not. And this deity, instead of condemning Migalankica, praises his actions, tells him he's gained merit, that he has crossed those who had not crossed Atin Stadasiti, basically framing the killing as a form of liberation for the monks.
That's perverse. So this encouragement just flips his perspective.
Completely. He starts to believe he's actually doing a good deed, helping these monks achieve their desire for release. So he continues the killing spree, now convinced he's performing a meritorious act.
Chilling. How a twisted justification can take hold like that. So the Buddha emerges from his retreat.
After half a month, yes. And he immediately notices something's wrong. The monastic community looks smaller. Tanabudvya Bikasogo, as the text says.
And his attendant, Ananda, explains what happened.
Ananda recounts the whole devastating chain of events. The intense meditation, the despair, the suicides, migalantika, the false encouragement. Everything.
So this leads to a turning point.
A pivotal moment. Ananda asks the Buddha for a new method, a different practice to help stabilize the Sangha, the community.
And the Buddha's response.
He teaches anapanasati samadhi, mindfulness of breathing. He describes it in glowing terms. Noble, exquisite, refreshing, a peaceful way of dwelling that clears away unwholesome states. Like a great rain cloud settling dust is the image used.
That sounds like a very direct counter-practice to the intensity of the previous one.
Exactly. He details the practice very precisely, too. Sitting upright, mindful breathing in, breathing out, long breaths, short breaths.
Aware of the whole body, calming bodily formations.
Experiencing rapture, joy, the mind itself. Concentrating the mind, freeing it.
And contemplating impermanence, dispassion, cessation, relinquishment. It's a whole system.
A complete, wholesome path designed specifically to counterbalance the extreme the monks had fallen into. It offered balance, peace, insight.
Okay, so after hearing the full story and providing this new meditation practice, the Buddha addresses the monks' actions directly.
He does. He admonishes them strongly. He says their actions were unfitting, unsuitable, improper, not like a recluse, unlawful, not to be done. Strong words.
And then he lays down the rule.
And he lays down the very first Pārājika rule. This defines the gravest kind of offense, the one that leads to expulsion.
And the wording is crucial here.
Absolutely. Any monk who intentionally, and that word intentionally, Sanjika, is key, deprives a human being of life, manusavigahi jivitavoropeya, or searches for a killer for him, sataharakai vasaparyasaya, is Pārājika and no longer in communion.
Asavaso.
No longer in communion. What does asaizo mean practically? It means complete expulsion. You're out of the Sangha. You can't live with them, practice with them, participate in ceremonies. It's essentially a spiritual death within that community context.
So a very clear, direct response to that initial crisis.
Extremely clear. It addresses the immediate horror and firmly establishes the sanctity of human life within the monastic code.
Okay, so that's the first scenario, the origin. But you mentioned these rules often need, well, refinement as new situations pop up.
Exactly. Laws evolve, right? And the next story involves a group called the Chabagya Bhikkhu, often translated as the monks of the sixth group. They appear quite often in the Vinaya, usually causing trouble.
Right, I've heard of them. And their motivation here was very different from those first monks.
Completely different. This wasn't about misguided spiritual practice. This was about, well, base greed and desire.
Desire for what?
For a woman, actually. They were captivated by the beautiful wife of a lay follower, an upasaka, who happened to be sick.
Oh, dear.
And they basically schemed, thinking, well, we'll only get a chance with her if her husband dies.
That's cold. So what did they do?
What they did was truly shocking. They went to visit the sick man, and they started to praise death to him. Markavan Saba.
Praise death. How?
They told him how virtuous he'd been in life. And that, because he was so virtuous, if he died now, he'd be guaranteed a wonderful rebirth. Maybe even in a heavenly realm, enjoying all sorts of divine pleasures.
Wow. So they're actively encouraging him to die, but framing it as spiritual advice?
Precisely. It's active incitement, masked as compassion or wisdom.
And did the sick man believe them?
Tragically, yes. He believed them. And the text says he then intentionally consumed unsuitable foods and drinks, things that would worsen his condition. And, well, he died.
Oh, no. What happened then?
Well, understandably, his wife was furious. She went public, complaining loudly that these monks, who were supposed to be virtuous followers of the Buddha, were shameless liars who had effectively killed her husband.
So it caused a scandal.
A big one. The criticism spread through the wider community. People were outraged.
And this eventually reached the Buddha.
It did. And again, the Buddha confirmed the facts, confirmed what the monks had done, and admonished them severely.
And this led to changing the rule.
It led to expanding the Pārājika rule. He added that the offense also applies if a monk praises death for him, marasavantavayar, or incites him to death, marajikavasamadapeya.
Incites him how?
By saying things like, oh man, what's the use of this evil, wretched life? Death is better than life. Actively encouraging suicide.
And again, the intention is critical.
Absolutely critical. The expansion specifically mentions actions done with the clear intention of causing death. The Pāli phrase is sitamano citta sakapo, which means something like mindful with the intention of death, thinking of death, desiring death. The mindset is paramount.
It's fascinating how they drill down into the language. So sanyachika, intentionally, that means knowing, planning it.
Yes, knowing, being aware, deliberately setting out to transgress.
And manasvigaho, the human being, you mentioned the definition was striking.
It really is, especially for an ancient text. It's defined as the period from the very first moment of consciousness arising in the mother's womb, right up until the point of death.
Wow, that's remarkably specific and early, defining life from conception or near it.
It is. It preempts millennia of debate, in a way.
Okay, and juvib avorpeia, depriving of life.
That means cutting off, obstructing, or breaking the continuity of what they call the life faculty, basically ending the biological life process.
And sattvaharako vasa pariseia, searching for a killer.
That covers not just finding someone to kill, but also providing any means for death. Giving someone a weapon, a sword, spear, club, stone or poison, or even a rope, anything intended to be used for killing.
Okay, and the new additions. Maratavansia, praising death.
That's showing the downsides of life and praising death itself, perhaps by describing those supposed heavenly rewards, like the 6-group monks did.
And marsiava samadhapeya, inciting to death.
That's more direct, actually telling someone, you should kill yourself, use this weapon, take this poison, hang yourself, jump off this cliff. Direct incitement.
It feels like a subtle but really important difference, doesn't it? Praising death versus directly telling someone to do it.
It is. And they even define dujivita, that wretched life phrase the monks used.
What did that cover?
It can refer to any life condition seen as undesirable. Poverty, lack of wealth, maybe even just the perceived suffering of human existence compared to, say, a divine life. So the monks couldn't just claim they were commenting on general suffering. Using it to incite death was the offense.
So the Buddha laid down this incredibly precise rule, defining the who, the human, from consciousness onwards, the what's depriving of life, and absolutely stressing the why, the intention.
Exactly. And the consequence remained absolute. The text uses a powerful image to illustrate this.
What's that?
It says, just as a slab of rock split into two cannot be rejoined, so too a monk who intentionally deprives a human being of life is no longer a monk, no longer a Sakyan son.
A split rock. That's final.
Utterly final. The monk is asavaso. Out of communion. No possibility of rejoining that community in that lifetime. The break is complete and irreversible for that offense.
That level of meticulousness is it's astounding for ancient law. But it sounds like the complexity didn't even stop there. This deep dive into Pārājika III seems to show they tried to cover almost every angle.
They really did. The text goes into extraordinary detail, outlining numerous ways a monk could commit this offense. It stresses that it's not just about, direct physical violence. It's also about the intention behind even indirect actions or influence.
So how did they break down these different modes of killing or incitement?
Well, first there's the straightforward one. Samat, direct action, killing with your own hand or maybe with a tool directly connected to you.
Okay, that makes sense.
But then it gets more intricate. There's atihaya, which means commanding others to kill.
Like ordering a hit.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
It could be a direct order or even passed down through a chain of messengers.
Right.
And what's really fascinating here is how the blame, the culpability, shifts.
How so?
It depends on the clarity of the command and what the killer actually understands and does. For example, if I intend for you to kill person A, and I command you, and you go and kill person A, then we both commit Pārājika.
Okay, commander and killer are both fully responsible.
Right. But say I command you to kill person A, but you misunderstand or get confused and kill person B instead.
Then what?
Then, according to this, I, the commander with the specific intent for A, might be exempt from Pārājika for B's death, because my specific intention wasn't fulfilled. But you, the killer who actually performed the act, you still incur Pārājika because you intentionally killed a human being.
Wow, that's incredibly specific about the target of the intention.
It highlights how central the precise mental state and intention were.
Okay, what about the praising death aspect? Did that expand too?
Yes. It wasn't just limited to spoken words. The offense could be incurred through body language, kena savanteri, suggesting death through gestures, or sending a messenger to praise death dutena savanteri, or even writing a letter lakaya savanteri.
Writing a letter suggesting someone would be better off dead.
If that suggestion or praise causes suffering that ultimately leads to the person's death and the intention was there, yes, it falls under the rule.
Okay, what about more physical but still indirect actions?
They covered those too. Things like setting traps, digging a pit, an opatem, hoping a specific person falls in and dies, or even just hoping anyone falls in.
Like setting a man trap.
Exactly. And placing dangerous object, leaving a weapon where someone might pick it up and use it, or where it might fall on someone, or leaving poison accessible, or even weakening a structure, hoping it collapses on someone.
So negligence that leads to death, if the intent was there.
If the intent to cause death was the driving force behind the negligence, yes. Also, administering substances, giving someone ghee, butter, oil, honey, sugar, things that could be medicine or food, but giving it with the intent to harm or kill.
This is comprehensive. What else?
Perhaps the most surprising part is how they accounted for psychological manipulation, using the senses. They called this category upahara.
Weaponizing the senses, how does that work?
Okay, so rapubaharo is using sights. Imagine deliberately showing someone incredibly terrifying images, trying to literally scare them to death.
Frightened to death.
Or conversely, showing someone incredibly beautiful or pleasing sights, knowing they long for them intensely, hoping they waste away from that longing and die.
That's subtle.
And it applies to sounds too. Sattupaharo, frightening sounds or enticing sounds used with the same deadly intent. Smells, gandupaharo, tastes, rasupaharo, touches, manipulating any of these senses with the intention to cause revulsion, disgust, overwhelming desire, or fatal discomfort.
It's almost Machiavellian, using someone's own reactions against them.
It shows a deep, if somewhat unsettling, understanding of psychology. And then there's Dhammapaharo, using discourse or teachings.
How could teaching be used to kill?
Well, imagine telling someone incredibly vivid, terrifying stories about hell realms, knowing they are prone to fear, with the specific intention of frightening them so much they die from shock or despair.
That's dark.
Or the opposite. Telling a very virtuous person incredibly detailed stories about the bliss of heaven, knowing they yearn for it, intending to make them so ecstatic and desirous of that afterlife that they literally die from the intensity of that emotion.
Die from joy.
Or perhaps the physiological stress of extreme ecstasy, induced with the intent to kill. Both scenarios, if the intent to kill was there and death resulted, incur pārājika. It really makes you wonder about the limits, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. What other methods did they list?
There's also giving direct advice. A chakan is answering when someone asks you how to die. Anusasani is advising them unasked. So if a monk tells someone how to commit suicide effectively, maybe promising rewards like wealth, fame, or heaven in the next life, and the person follows the advice and dies.
Pārājika for the monk.
If the intent was there,
Yes, even if the person asked for the advice.
the act of providing the means or method with that intent seems to be the key. And then there's even arranging signals.
Signals.
Sakistakamat, setting up a prearranged signal for a killing to happen. Or Nimittakama, making a specific sign at a specific time, maybe to indicate to a hidden killer, now's the time.
This covers conspiracy, essentially. The level of detail is just...
No.
How did they manage to differentiate between all these subtle variations in practice?
The absolute linchpin across every single scenario is the intention, maritipayo, the intention to kill. The text meticulously, painstakingly, differentiates the consequences based on whether that specific intention to kill was present or absent. It's remarkably similar, in a way, to how modern law distinguishes between different degrees of homicide, is it? Like murder versus manslaughter.
That's a really good point. So remind us of the breakdown again.
Okay. Pārājika, the most serious expulsion is incurred when there's a clear intention to kill, marandupayo, and a human being dies as a direct result.
Got it. Intent plus death, pārājika.
Then there's thullaccaya. This is a serious offense, a grave offense, but less than pārājika. You might get this if your intention caused serious harm or suffering, but maybe wasn't directly aimed at killing, or if you intended to kill but death didn't actually happen, or if the victim wasn't human.
Okay, so intent to harm or failed attempt or non-human victim, that's thullaccaya.
Then dukkaṭa. This is a minor offense, often translated as wrongdoing. This could be for actions done without any intent to kill, but still breaking some minor monastic rule, or maybe preparatory actions that could have led to something worse if the intent had been there. Preliminary steps.
Right, like maybe digging a small hole without intending anyone fall in, but it was still careless.
Something like that, potentially.
And finally, anapati, which means no offense.
When does that apply?
When the action was genuinely unintentional, asanjika. Or done without knowing ajanatasa, like you genuinely didn't know someone was there. Or, crucially, done without the intent to kill namariti-payasa.
Yeah.
Or if the person was considered legally insane, umatakasa. Or if it was a genuine mistake made by someone totally new to the rules at a mikasa, a first offense by a beginner under specific circumstances.
Those distinctions are so vital, they really put the focus squarely on the state of mind.
Absolutely. The internal state is paramount.
And the source gives specific examples to illustrate these, right? Dozens of them. They really help clarify things. For instance, remember the monks praising death. There's a case where monks compassionately praise death to a suffering, terminally ill fellow monk, genuinely thinking it might comfort him, but he takes it as encouragement and refuses food or medicine and dies.
And the ruling?
Still Pārājika. It shows that even if the motive felt compassionate, the action of praising death, done with the understanding it could lead to death and resulting in death, still met the criteria. The rule against praising death seems quite strict.
That's tough. What about accidents?
Accidents are treated very differently. There's a case of a monk accidentally sitting on a child hidden under some cloth and the child dies. Ruling. Anapati, no offense. Lack of knowledge, lack of intent.
Okay.
Another one. During monastery construction, a heavy mortar falls and kills someone below. Again, Anapati, no offense, assuming it was a genuine accident without malicious intent or culpable negligence amounting to intent.
So intent really is the decider.
Completely. There's another case. A monk sees someone choking. He hits them on the back to dislodge the food, but the person dies from the blow.
And
Anapati, no offense, if there was absolutely no intent to kill, only to help. The intention saves him from the Pārājika offense.
But what about that poison case you mentioned? Testing poison.
Ah, yes. A monk gives someone poison, maybe curious about its effects, not necessarily intending for them to die, but just to see what happens. The person dies.
What's the ruling there?
Thullaccaya. A serious offense because giving poison is inherently dangerous and wrong. But not Pārājika because the specific marthipayo, the direct intent to kill, was deemed absent. The intent was perhaps reckless curiosity, not murder per se. It shows how specific that intent to kill needed to be for the ultimate penalty.
That's a fine line. What about sending someone into danger?
If a monk tells someone to go into, say, a forest known to be full of bandits or dangerous spirits, it only becomes Pārājika if the monk sent them there, hoping or intending for them to be killed by the bandits or spirits. If he just sent them on an errand without that deadly wish, even if they do get killed, it's not Pārājika for the monk. Again, intent.
Okay. What about the executioner example? Advising the executioner.
Right. A monk sees a thief about to be executed slowly and painfully. He tells the executioner, hey, just kill him quickly, end his suffering.
Seems compassionate in a grim way.
Maybe. But the ruling, Pārājika for the monk.
Why?
Because his words directly incited the executioner to complete the act of killing. Even though the motive might seem merciful, the action was a direct verbal push towards the taking of life. It shows how the rule protects life absolutely, regardless of perceived good reasons for ending it in that specific context.
That's stark. What about abortion?
Specifically addressed. If a monk administers medicine or performs an action with the intent to cause an abortion and the fetus dies, remembering their definition of human life starts early, it's Pārājika, even if the mother survives. However, contrast that with giving medicine intended for, say, contraception or even to aid conception, and death results as an unintended side effect.
Yeah.
Then it's usually dukkaṭa, the minor offense, because the primary intent wasn't to end a life, even if a life was tragically lost as an indirect consequence. Again, the intention defines the offense category.
And finally, what about non-humans? You mentioned yakas.
Right. Killing a non-human being, like a yaka, often translated as a demon or nature spirit, only results in a thullaccaya, the serious offense, not Pārājika.
Why the difference?
Because the Pārājika rule, as laid down and expanded, specifically pertains to a manusaviggaha, a human being, defined from that point of consciousness in the womb. Killing other types of beings was still wrong, a serious offense, but didn't carry the ultimate penalty of expulsion reserved for intentionally killing a human.
So, stepping back from all this incredible detail, what does it all really mean? What's the big picture here?
I think what's truly striking, what really stands out, is the sheer breadth and depth of the ethical consideration that went into this. It's not just don't murder.
No, clearly not.
It encompasses psychological manipulation, verbal incitement, indirect actions, conspiracy, negligence driven by malice, all while meticulously distinguishing between intentional acts, unintentional ones, and different levels of harmful intent.
It feels incredibly sophisticated.
It really is. It's a remarkable ancient legal and ethical system that grappled head-on with the complexities of human agency, responsibility, motivation, and the profound value placed on human life. It feels incredibly sophisticated even looking at it today.
So we've journeyed through this intricate landscape of Pārājika III. We've seen how it aimed to regulate not just outward actions, but the inner world, the intentions driving them.
From those tragic, perhaps misguided beginnings with the monks meditating too intensely.
Right, to the calculated, chilling manipulations driven by greed and desire.
This deep dive really shows the meticulous care taken in ancient Buddhist law to address what they saw as the most fundamental violation.
And what's really relevant, I think, is how these ancient stories, despite being, from a very different time and place, still echo. They raise timeless questions, don't they?
Absolutely. Questions about responsibility, the immense power of our words, the unforeseen consequences of our actions, that slippery slope.
Yeah, and the incredibly careful way they distinguish between intending harm and harm happening accidentally with different consequences, that reflects a really sophisticated grasp of human psychology and ethics. It resonates across millennia.
It does indeed.
So as you, listening, reflect on this journey through ancient monastic law, maybe consider this. If texts from so long ago went to such extraordinary lengths to define every nuance of intentionally ending a human life, what does that tell us about the ongoing, universal human struggle? Our struggle to define and value and protect life in all its forms, right here, right now.
And maybe ask yourself, what hidden intentions, what subtle influences might be shaping the ethical dilemmas we face in our own lives today? Things we might not even be fully aware of.